Welcome everyone to today's panel discussion on DEI in STEM. My name is Lauren DeJambry. I'm the Assistant Dean of College Relations and Development here at the College of Chemistry at UC Berkeley, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's talk. Today's panel discussion is part of the Berkeley Ecosystems, a new initiative where you can learn, explore, and connect with Berkeley faculty, alumni, students, and industry innovators on relevant topics to you. Our next event is on Wednesday, March 24th at 11 a.m. and will be a panel discussion on innovations in brewing. We hope you'll register in the link provided in the chat and later at ecosystems.berkeley.edu. Now for a few logistical matters regarding today's discussion. Today's panel discussion is being recorded, as has all past events. And in the coming days, the recording of this event will be available at ecosystems.berkeley.edu. We invite you to re-listen or share today's panel discussion or to explore some of our past discussions. We are also planning to field questions today towards the end of our discussion. So please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, to share any thoughts or pose any questions to our panelists. We'll do our best to get through all the questions at the end of this discussion. And finally, directly following our event today, you'll receive a short survey. Please take a couple of minutes to provide feedback on today's discussion, and also, importantly, to provide us input on future topics that might be of interest to you. And now it is my great honor to introduce today's panel discussion on DEI in STEM and our discussion facilitator, Ann Baranger. Ann was recently appointed as the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the College of Chemistry here at UC Berkeley. Prior to this role, she was the Director of Undergraduate Chemistry and currently still serves as the Faculty Assistant for Teaching and Learning in the Vice Chancellor of Education's office. Thank you, Ann, for agreeing to facilitate our panel discussion today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be facilitating this panel today, and it's my pleasure to begin by introducing our panelists. We have Linda Chen, who has 20 years of marketing, GM, and leadership experience at multinational branded companies and is the current Chief Marketing Officer at Ciara. She has an MBA from University of Michigan and a BS in Chemical Engineering from Berkeley. We also have Javed Drake, who has led and advised research for Gillette, Duracell, and is currently a principal engineer at Procter & Gamble and a battery researcher at MIT. He has his BS and PhD in chemical engineering from Berkeley and a music minor from MIT. And we also have Chrissy Stachel. She is the current Director of Education, Outreach, and Diversity at the NSF Center for Genetically Encoded Materials. She received her BS in Chemistry and Neuroscience from the University of Washington and her PhD in Chemistry from Berkeley, where her dissertation focused on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So we're going to begin with several questions to be a series of questions. And our first question for the panelists is, why is diversity crucial to success in STEM? And Javed, would you like to start off on this question?
Yes, hi. Great to see all the panelists, and thanks to everyone for attending. Yeah, so why is it so important? We have unprecedented challenges. I know we say this every generation, but we certainly have them now, right? In climate change, in health, biology, racial inequity, and gender inequity in and of itself, right? So we have some incredible challenges in our society that we need all of the top minds of every, of all genders, race, ethnicity to be able to tackle these really huge challenges. The solutions, the other quote is, the solutions of the past are not going to solve the problems of the future and even of the present times. So we need the top minds. Diversity and inclusion and diversity, equity, inclusion is important so that we are able to get all of those top minds from everywhere to solve these problems. In fact, the lack of diversity, equity, inclusion has been some of the causes of actually the current problems. And when we think about, some of the challenges. So we really need the top minds, and this makes it not just an issue for those who are marginalized. It's actually an issue for everyone when we do not have access to all of the top minds of every background. So that's my the shorter version of my thoughts there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Javed. I think it's really about creating safe places for everyone to contribute their ideas so that the best ones kind of boil up to the surface. And I think this is a key thing, both in education, getting the pipeline of people going into STEM broadened, and then so that it actually, you have more people involved as you go into higher education as well as industry. Totally agree.
Yeah, also agree. And I always like highlighting that there's been a lot of studies that show that diverse teams of people are generally more innovative and have more to contribute back to the communities they're working in. So I think it's really important for people to have that in mind.
Great. Our second question, where do racism, sexism, discrimination undermine the workplace? And do you have a personal experience that you're willing to share? And Chrissy, are you able to answer this question?
Yes. I feel like that's very loaded. Hi, everyone. It's super nice to be here. And yeah, I think coming at this from the angle of some of the work I did for my PhD, sense of belonging is heavily influenced by sort of people's perceptions and how they treat individuals, especially in science. And one of the things that I really care about is this notion of how you are perceived in a certain community. And if you are, say, a person of color in a predominantly white lab or institution or department, so you're sort of not fitting into this mold, and people are aware of that, right? So if you are constantly in this space where you already feel like you don't belong and still looked down upon and discriminated against and told that you're not smart enough or as smart as everybody else, you are going to continue to feel like your contributions are not valued in that space. And so it's incredibly important for people to recognize that that is a thing that happens either consciously or unconsciously, and work actively to make those spaces more inclusive and make those people of color or anybody from a marginalized background feel welcome. Yeah, did I answer the question? I guess personal experience, I have like 5 years of those, so maybe more, a whole lifetime of them. But yeah, I think I speak, just everything I said is from personal experience and from research that I've done. So yeah, just making sure that spaces are inclusive should be the priority for every boss, scientist, yeah, etc.
Yeah, I certainly have had experiences with that. It hasn't been as, I would say, overtly, negative, where it's like you cannot function. So most companies have diversity training, there's sexual harassment training, there's all these different things. And I think previously and earlier in my career, I had some of that where I was in situations where I was the only female and person of color as well. And it was kind of like, I didn't even know what to do with that situation. And it was kind of, comments that were made a little bit more jokingly, and you're taken aback. You're like, I don't even know what I should say to that. And so some of the situations that I've been in where, people look at me and they're like, oh, konnichiwa. And I was like, I'm not Japanese. And then they go into the situation where they're like, oh, you speak very good English. And I'm like, born in the US, so there's a bunch of things where people jump to conclusions based off of what you look like. And you don't really know, how to get it back on track, where you're like, hey, I want to talk to you about work, or here are some things that we want to figure out. And it just kind of puts you on your heels and stuff. So it's really not feeling comfortable and have always feeling like you need to crawl out of that kind of preconceived notions about what you look like and who you are.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that's I find useful is to just remind that these situations of sexism, racism, and homophobia, other things are real. These things actually happen. It's not just, these aren't just sort of figments of imagination. Just one incident I'll point out is that I was on a business trip, and I was returning the rental car, so I was working, right? So I was on work time, not physically at my office location. I was returning the rental car, and two police officers, as I was returning my rental car in the drop-off box, two police officers came up to me and said, "You look like a suspect of an incident that happened, that we had heard reported happen." Okay. So here I am, I'm on a collaboration visit, right? At the end of a collaboration visit, I'm thinking about the collaboration, next steps. Do we get a university involved? So I'm thinking about this, okay? And my mind has to quickly shift, because that's part of what, as a Black male, as a Black person, you have to be able to instantly switch into, how do I sort of navigate this situation? And the police officers put me in the back of their car. They said I was the prime suspect. There was an officer who wanted to press a confession out of me that I had stolen something from a convenience store down the street. I explained that I did not do it. I had nothing to do with it. They said, "Tell us you stole a pack of cigarettes and we will let you off easy." I said, "I don't have anything to do with that." And I just explained my background. Look, I'm I did my PhD. I even said I did my PhD at Berkeley. I sort of explained all these things that I shouldn't even have to, just to try to reduce the likelihood that. So as I was riding in that car, heading toward to be identified, okay, right, dressed business casual and so forth, to be identified to see if I had committed this crime, and I'm thinking, I don't have, this person who's going to look at me is going to decide my fate, right? If they can't tell the difference between me and another person, or maybe they did it and they were the cashier did it and they need a scapegoat. If for whatever reason, if I get named as this, I don't know what to do. I was new to the area, back to the Boston area. I had just started a relationship with my wife to be, right? And I don't even know who I could call. How do I call someone I'm starting a relationship with and say, "Oh yeah, I'm in jail. Can you help get me out?" Right? I had no idea I'm going to call. Right? Okay. I got to of course, all these things racing through my mind. When I got there, the person looked at me and said, "No, that's not him." Okay. But this unnerving situation of having to be on alert, and even knowing, this was a while ago, but as a Black male, I just know how situations can escalate. If I had anything but the calmest tone, if I had expressed even the feelings that I had about the situation, it could have quickly escalated, even though I had nothing to do with it. So this is a real thing. And that's not the only incident that's happened to me. And so it's really an issue. I've had instances of being, of eating, and every Black person who went through the cashier line had to open up and show what they had, because the cashier didn't believe them. And when I did a study, I actually watched the cashier do this and see other people pass through and not be questioned about what they had. So these sort of micro to actually, life challenging type of situations are real, and they happen, and it's rampant, unfortunately. So just pointing out that this is a real thing.
Yeah, totally agree. I actually watched that happen. I had a very good friend. He and I were interns summer between first and second year of business school. And he was from a top business school, just like I was. And he and I were walking into the headquarters building. And, we made it to our offices, and then the building security asked him for his identification, because they asked him, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I work here." So, but it was, he's an African-American male. And he's like, "That's the third time that happened to me this summer." So it's somebody had called security and was questioning why he was in the building. And so it's those kinds of things where it's like, yeah, it's not so blatant and you don't know exactly who was doing it, but that's like the snap judgments, which just instantly takes away that person's ability to contribute, because you're just like, why am I going to be, instantly judged like this? So I'm really sorry to hear that, Javit.
And it's a mental tax, right?
It is.
So
Absolutely.
that energy I could have spent working on a next, innovation, the next, a next product, that interval of time and before and after that is shot. So that's part of what I say our best is not being brought out of, out of all of us when these things happen, so it's an extra energy, and I see extra alert in my head. At any moment, I have to be thinking about, and many others, thinking about, if someone's looking, I have to be thinking about this.
Yeah. And it's also that's exactly what I was going to say, the sort of mental tax and like the code switch that you have to do that has to be like automatic for you. It's like you go through this experience and you're hurt and you're overwhelmed and like emotionally distraught, and then you just have to like switch into work mode when you have to go back, or you have to like know that the time that you're spending responding to the harm and telling yourself that it's the other person that had harmed you and it's not your fault, and then immediately go into a meeting or like go into a space where nobody knows what happened, nobody may understand it, they may or they may not. And so I think that's the biggest tax. It's like you have to be on guard all the time and be ready to be okay immediately afterwards. And that's incredibly emotionally exhausting.
Yeah. So to kind of bring those experiences and bring them forward to like what are some solutions, what can we do? And so my next question is, where do you see or not see integration of DEI within industry? And Linda, maybe you could start us off here.
Yeah, happy to. I would, want to start this off in saying the vast majority of people have the best of intentions, and companies do as well. And so in my, over 2 decades of being in industry, I've seen tremendous progress and much more openness to having discussions and awareness that we need to be inclusive. In fact, I double down on it in diversity. I'm kind of like, I'll tell my team, I love diversity. It's a superpower of ours. Every one of us will do these various style and leadership tests, and people have their little quirks and preferences, and we got the composite for our team. And while some people were off the charts on one aspect versus another, as a team we were almost completely balanced. And so that's kind of what I love about diverse teams, that we all have our own little weird things that we do, and I think we get to better outcomes when we do have different ways of thinking. So most of the companies that I've been at have really great intentions. There's, as I mentioned, training. We have various forums, town halls to just share experiences similar to this panel. Just getting awareness of some of the situations and the hurtful things that can happen, or even what they call are microaggressions. These are just kind of the little jokes that just don't land quite the right way, and it's not necessarily that they have bad intent. It's just not being educated on some of these things. Now, where it lands not perfectly well right now is when you have kind of overt diversity councils, which are basically trying to get to certain numbers or quotas, which feel very unnatural to me. So earlier on at a previous company, this was in the, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, they would have these diversity councils, and they would sit me down and they would say, so tell us, what do your people want? And I'm like, I'm not sure how to speak for billions of people. Are you asking me to speak for women, for Asians? Like, what is it? And it was very uncomfortable for somebody in their 20s to have that kind of responsibility. But I do think that we are making progress. It is undoubtedly ugly for most of this. But I think the more that we can look at it and embrace it and hear each other and share stories, we will make progress. A lot of times it is very, very slow. So I was at another company where we were looking at corporate boards, and there's this huge initiative to try to get more diversity in publicly traded corporate boards. And, women, it was like 5%. And, boards were trying to get the sole woman to join the board. And they're like, check mark, we got diversity. But now you're starting to see a little bit more of a broader definition of diversity and getting, all the different aspects of diversity. So not just gender. So we are making a little bit of progress, not very quick progress, but I'm definitely seeing it.
Yeah, I would say, I would just add that it's pretty crucial. And, like Procter & Gamble, for instance, is a company that makes products to serve consumers around the world and a range of consumers around the country. And, we absolutely need diverse workforce and an inclusive workforce to be able to serve those consumers. You really have to be, even sometimes literally in the homes of consumers, and we absolutely need a diverse workforce from our consumer understanding to the way we design products to how they're ergonomically designed. It's absolutely important. Products can fail if they're just off the mark in terms of not serving and meeting consumers' needs. So it's very important as a consumer-facing company to absolutely have diversity and inclusion in all levels of the organization. It's even beyond integration. It's embracing actually diversity, equity, and inclusion is pretty crucial. We may get to it later, but affinity networks, company sponsored affinity networks, not just interest groups that groups of employees of like backgrounds get together, but actually company sponsored, endorsed, with a very senior managers, supporting the activities and recognizing the value that those organizations bring is pretty crucial.
Yeah, and I don't work in industry, but I have this sort of like hiring perspective and sort of how diversity gets addressed at various points. And I think one of the biggest things I've seen a lot in academia and outside of it is that sometimes we'll have these, like what Linda said, check the box, hire a woman, or like hire a faculty of color. And then what ends up happening is that if they're the only person in the department or in the space or in the company that looks the way that they do, they're kind of seen as the diversity hire. And then they're put into this bucket that's like, but you're not like the rest of us. We just hired you to fill the quota. And so that's like, who wants to be the diversity hire? Like you want to be in the space you are because of your contributions and your value and because of your worth, not because you look a certain way. And so like from that angle, I think just making sure that every community can ensure that safe space and inclusive space for the people that they're bringing on board will do wonders, even just that. So.
So diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, is an ever important and increasingly prominent issue in today's world. And we've been talking about it now focused on industry and personal stories. But what are the challenges and opportunities for creating real change in the field at this moment? And Javed, could you start us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely is important, and it's useful that we have a time that many more people recognize this, as many of us have been saying for decades. But some of the challenge, first of all, you said what are the challenges and opportunities? Some of the challenges, is complacency. So just sort of having the moment pass and the emotions pass, and then kind of everyone resorting back to their previous behaviors and cultures and so forth, and so forth. that's really a risk, a sort of a challenge. And I think, one of the things is just to remind, as we do with these testimonials, is just remind people that this is real. This is an active problem and an active cost in our society. For complacency. Another thing is sort of the siloing of people in there. Sometimes we are preaching to the choir kind of a bit, and having the message, really reach those who, could benefit the most from recognizing the benefits to everyone of diversity, equity, inclusion. The opportunities, in addition to, I think, addressing these particular, matters of there's certain sort of intervention type of things. An opportunity also we have with this moment is to actually put down sort of lasting roots as far as our trajectory of diversity, equity, inclusion. So doing things like sort of having the next wave, the next sort of have generation away of scientists, engineers, technologists, mathematicians, making sure that's a diverse cohort, making sure that when we look in 10, 15 years, okay, that there is improved diversity, because we can let this moment kind of pass, okay, and then in 10 years be in the same situation. So I think it's babies aren't born racist or sexist, right? That's sort of trained in us. So the earlier we can catch the sort of next generation to understand, hey, and they're growing up in a new world. They're seeing diversity, and of course the leaders of the country. They're seeing more diversity than in the past in other ways. So having that next cohort, a wave of people come through, and what that starts is people who are in positions of authority and power now, reaching out and mentoring. Are the groups of people that you're mentoring underrepresented groups? Are the people you are training? The next leaders are picked. Leaders are picked. The next people who will be taking over these, heads of departments and heads of, directors of R&D organizations, and so forth. These are picked. Someone says, I like her or him or them, and I want that person to be the next leader of this organization. Those people are picked, okay? It doesn't just happen. It's not like a raffle, right? So making sure that when you pick someone, or when the folks in positions of authority, when you pick someone, I want to pick someone who's going to have I want to pick this female candidate of color, and develop them into the next leader. So that's a way to sort of put in some lasting roots so that we are actually progressing over time.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I wanted to add, I think particularly for a challenge, we're all affiliated with Berkeley. We're used to being good at what we do. As scientists, we don't like being wrong. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is just having recognition of the fact that, you can be contributing to sexism and racism without even knowing it. And you have to there has to be a commitment to that sort of self-analysis and how you're contributing to, let's say, only hiring men or only hiring white men and women. And those biases, if they continue to go unrecognized and, just continue to work the way they are, nothing is going to change. And so I think thinking about it as we would think of anything else as a scientist, developing your skill set in learning how to address and navigate bias and standing up for somebody when they're the victim of a microaggression or whatever it is. I think that's the biggest challenge. And yeah, that's what we all need to work on.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that has been said. The number one way that we can all help ourselves is to show passion and to not wait for people to tap us on the shoulder and say, I'm choosing you. The thing that I've learned is just show that you're interested in the topic and have a conversation with different people in the organization, either at school or at work, just about different topic areas. The biggest thing that was hard for me to make a transition from academia to work was I thought I just needed to do the assignments that I was asked to do them really well, and people would just naturally know that I was amazing. And it just doesn't happen that way. Javit's totally right. There's this complacency and there's this bias towards recency. And so if you're just kind of sitting back and waiting for somebody to, somehow notice you, that's kind of not what happens. And so you just need to get yourself out there and not be afraid to be judged, and just go in there and show them how amazing you are and show them that you've got these great ideas. And so the more that people can see that, you're adding value and you have great ideas, then, all this stuff will over time be rewritten over some of the stereotypes that people have. So they need examples of where diversity is really important and adds value. So that was my biggest personal learning on how to address this, and not being afraid or, feeling like I needed to educate everybody about this. It was just, it's more like, I have a lot of passion. I have things that I want to share. And you just are part of the team after a while. So that's how you actually drive lasting change. And then as you get to be in positions where you can make hiring decisions, obviously look for diversity. Think of that as a competitive advantage, not just in industry, but certainly for academia as well.
Yeah, so hearing about kind of approaches that you personally take, I'd like to move to, what would you recommend that actions that other people take? And my question here is, what is an ally and what can you do to be an ally? Chrissy, could you start us off with this one?
Yes. Yeah, so I guess referring a little bit back to sort of how Linda ended, and then thinking about how to approach these things with an open mind, and addressing the fact that bias and sexism and racism and all of that exists. Being an ally is being willing to learn and to correct yourself and to recognize when you are either, harming somebody because of something that you're unaware of, or noticing that somebody else has been harmed and stepping in. And so from that perspective, I think being an ally is just constantly being ready to learn and ready to commit yourself to intruding when others, like if you see somebody is being the victim of racism or being stopped by the police or something, go up to them and be like, I don't understand what's going on here, intrude. And it's hard, but I think having that recognition that you can do something as somebody that maybe won't be victimized in the same way is incredibly valuable. And then I just to give an example, I like calling them bias buddies, but it's kind of like the person that does step in and acts as an ally. The first time I was teaching at Berkeley as a PhD student, I was talking to my mom right as the students were coming in, and I speak to her in Spanish. And so these students were coming in, and one of them made a comment about me being there to clean the room or something. And it's just very common. I get mistaken for being janitorial staff all the time. And my teacher scholar actually was like, no, she's our GSI and she's awesome. I was like, cool, I don't have to think about this. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And just their ability to have recognized that happened and then redirect the attention to okay, we're starting class and that's what we're all here for. I think that's being an ally. So.
Allyship, also thanks, and I agree. And also the allyship is pretty important because it shifts the mindset from sexism, racism, being a problem of the marginalized to being a problem that's the responsibility of everyone to address. So racism against Black people is not a Black problem. If someone think of a relationship, okay, if someone's getting abused, okay, and there's an abuser, you wouldn't say that it's a problem of the person getting abused. It's actually a problem, just period. So it was really called upon, and also just recognizing that the current, if we think of the culture as like a current, a flowing, river, right? Chemical engineering, right? Think about fluid mechanics, right? Flowing pipe, right? If you're moving with the current is racist and sexist. Okay, so this recognize that it's really, you have to go actually upstream to counter that in order to be actually, doing so. Floating with the current, and this is what I mentioned about complacency. Floating with the current is just sort of being complicit and contributing to the challenge. So I think I would challenge for people who are, men as well as, those who are white to think about what you can do to actually be counter to the current and adopting allyship. And then also and there are a lot of ways to sort of self-educate now, to learn about a lot of books that are out to sort of self-educate as a first step.
Yeah, I think the allies, they have to be advocates. They have to basically be another person who can advocate for that that person. And I've had a lot of allies in my life, and I've been very fortunate with that. And one person comes to mind from Berkeley. So Professor Plouffe, who was technical writing professor, and he saw a very shy Asian girl, and he somehow saw something in my writing, and he, was like, "Hey, would you like to help TA?" And I was like, okay. So it's really getting yourself, as the person who's getting that mentorship and having the ally reach out to you, being embracing of that and doubling down on it. The ally, Professor Plouffe, basically was like, hey, I'm going to give you opportunities and I'm going to advocate for you. And sometimes, coach you to get out of your own way. And he would push me and say, hey, you should try this. And I'm like, oh, but I'm good at math and science, not writing. And he's like, no, you really are a good writer. So there's certain things where it's like, I was actually my worst critic. So sometimes finding different kinds of allies to surround yourself with, you can actually, unleash a lot of the potential that you have yourself. So I've had some allies in my career where, they actively, similar to Javit, where, they double down and they're like, I'm going to help you with this. Or with Christy, where it's like, no, that's not their role. I've been in situations where people assume I'm the secretary, and I'll just naturally take the notes in the meeting. That doesn't always happen anymore, so that's really good. But you got to really embrace all of the people that can help you in your career.
Great. Now, we're going to take this moment to move on to audience questions. There's a number of really great questions in the Q&A, and so we're going to move on there. And we are going to be joined by our new Chief Diversity Officer, in a moment, Dr. Bryce Yates, but he's going to join us in a moment. So I will introduce him after our first question. All right, so let's move on to some of these audience questions. So here's one question that maybe you and the panel could speak to. What is the most effective way to change the mindset towards prioritizing DEI of those that have grown and efficiently developed in science without being aware of their privileges? Thoughts on that question? Shall I repeat it? That's another option.
Yeah, it'd be good if you could repeat it.
Okay, one more time. What is the most effective way to change the mindset towards prioritizing DEI of those who have grown and efficiently developed in science without being aware of their privilege?
That is a good question.
Good question, yes.
I think it's just getting having the dialogue. So I see it a bit with my own children. So I have 2 daughters, and sometimes they'll tell me, oh, you know, that science class is for boys. And I'm like, no, it's not just for boys. And there's stuff that's in the, you know, kind of in society that give those signals. And I'm not aware of them a lot of times, but kids are. So they're seeing these things repeated over and over again. So I think it really is about encouraging people of diversity to be much more participatory, as well as just having those conversations with people who are privileged and just don't even think about that science and math are, you know, accessible to them. So it's a tough thing for sure.
I think also, yeah, I like the idea of having dialogue and being able to talk about it and having spaces where you can bring that recognition up. There's also just a lot of data on, like from the Pew Research Center, for example, and ACS and NSF have a lot of data on just the numbers of people in science and the numbers of, like, the statistics of how many people get faculty positions, or like in real life, like how many less Black Americans get mortgages than white Americans. And so, like, having some of those facts kind of in your back pocket, and when people bring up stuff like that, you can be like, no, actually, statistically, this is whatever, more or less likely on whatever the situation is. And then something else I've started doing is every time I give a talk or a presentation, I start with like a photo of somebody who is either a person of color or female in science, who has made a major contribution to the field and that's relevant to the talk I'm giving, just to sort of bring awareness to the fact that even though we don't talk about, you know, people who don't look like Einstein, they exist. They made huge contributions to science, and oftentimes we don't know about it. So just like having that intro to make sure that people are aware that, yeah, they could have an assumption of a type of person that looks like a scientist, but that's not correct. Yeah.
Yeah, great points by the other panelists, and things actually good points that I could even take back to use on data and statistics and really showing them. So, you know, a couple other things are, you know, people and you know, many people are inherently oriented around themselves, right? They're sort of focused on themselves and their world, right? And sometimes the challenge is that people really haven't looked at or thought about what's going on with people around them. So if someone is not seeing the point of diversity, you know, equity, inclusion, one is that, you know, I think if they have, you know, just, you know, asking people, you know, do they actually have people of diverse, you know, sort of background, or, you know, race and ethnic diversity, you know, gender diversity in their life? Because and then the other thing is, I think testimonials, because when I share the incidences that happen to me with people I know, it's it's powerful anyway, but it's very powerful to say, oh wow, this is, you know, if a friend or someone, even acquaintance, wow, this is someone I know and respect, and this is happening to them. So it really kind of dawns on people a little bit more when it's someone that they know and they know things are happening to them. The other thing about when people are kind of in a world or a bubble that's not, you know, diverse, it doesn't have diversity, equity, inclusion in the forefront, is that having people realize the cost to them, right? So that's another thing. So, you know, if they're, you know, one of the things that's important about our affinity networks that we have is that it's important in sort of developing an inclusive culture. Okay, you see companies that don't have this, that face lawsuits, right? You see heads of the companies having to step down because of situations that are happening, right? And that's a cost that's actually a cost to the institution. Okay, if even if the institution distances themselves from that person that committed an egregious act, it's still a cost to that institution. So recognizing that, you know, these, you know, having terrible incidents happen, or and so forth, is a risk to whatever institution that. So some of it's kind of a little bit of fire insurance if that doesn't if it sinks home, it hits home. In broader society, of course, there are other costs, right? Like the extensive incarceration rate, right? How that's actually costing everyone a lot of money in tax dollars in government spending. When we know in California we have tight budgets, and we are spending a lot of money on prisons, right? It'd be great to have that money, spent on making education more equally accessible. That would be much better use of investing that money instead of trying to put people in prison. So just having people realize what it's costing them, then sometimes that hits home as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing that I thought of while Javed was talking. So often the people that are not aware of their privilege are the ones that tend to commit the most microaggressions, or the ones that underestimate people of color, for example. So like I've been in situations where people are like, oh, wow, I'm so surprised at how smart you are. And it's like, okay, so if you have the capacity in that moment, like I would respond with, why is that surprising? Or like, what makes you think that it's weird for someone like me to be smart? And if I don't have the capacity for that because I'm shocked by the comment or whatever, that's where also having an ally or a bias buddy comes in handy. Because if the person recognizes that this is happening, they can be like, oh, it's not surprising to me because she's excelled all her life, or like, something like that, to sort of combat the bias that, and just that assumption that people make. So that's something that you could do on a personal level.
Also, I did have at one point, I had my team take an assessment. So there's assessment to actually, one can sort of assess one's own bias, right? And that's, there's the online tools that's based on images to actually see. And the final statistically, most whites are biased against Black, most men are biased against women. Even there's even in-group bias, which is not as severe as sort of the other bias, but there's even in-group bias. So that is Blacks, having a slight bias, but it's usually not as extreme as obviously the out-group bias. But having people do their own sort of assessment and say, okay, you don't think there's an issue? Try this and see how you do.
Yeah, there's a lot of unconscious bias, which people may not be aware of. And I actually found we were doing a training, and I discovered I had a little unconscious bias myself, because I said something about like, something about people without college degrees. And I said, oh, you're so well spoken. And the person was like, well, when you said that, I don't actually have a college degree. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that I had that kind of pattern in my head, thinking that somebody who didn't have a college degree would be well spoken. And so I was taken aback, and I was like, I own that. I was like, I wasn't aware of it. And now that I'm aware of it, I'm going to do things differently. So a lot of times it's like, just like in that moment, as Christy was saying, if you have it within you to call somebody out on that, you may be doing them a favor because they weren't aware, and you're actually educating them in the moment. Sometimes it's very hard to say something, but all of those are learning moments for us. And I have found, talking to some of our public schools around here, and my kids go to public schools, so it's more diverse than private schools. And our local high school, has kids from economically diverse neighborhoods coming in as well. And so there's a lot of diversity in terms of access and all of that. And so having people of diversity, being able to show them examples of where, you know, Hispanics can go into STEM, women can go into STEM, you know, and all these different things. They just haven't actually been exposed to it. So the more that we can do to give them examples of like, yeah, you can do it too. And being the ally for, you know, earlier education, I think will help widen the funnel so that, you know, people aren't self-selecting out and saying, oh, that's not available to me.
I want to interrupt this really interesting conversation to introduce our Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Bryce Gates, who is joining us for the discussion. And he has been working with us for a month and has had quite a lot of experience over the years in higher education in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and most recently was the Assistant Vice President for Institutional Equity at Baylor University in Texas, which is where he is now in Texas. Do you want to say a word, Bryce?
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, Anne, and for the panelists. Thank you all for your great insight, but also your transparency as well. I know when we talk about DEI and we talked about our lived experiences, sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes it can be re-traumatizing. But it's important that we have these conversations so we can really move DEI and belonging forward. It's important that we also come together as a support method as well too. So having these opportunities to engage in conversations are needed for ourselves, but also for the work that we do. So I just want to say thank you all for the messages that you all shared, your transparency, letting us know a little bit more about you, and then also helping to educate us as well too. So thank you all for your message today, and I'm very excited to be at Berkeley and working in the College of Chemistry with Anne, being able to work a little bit with Christy. And so just excited for doing this work of DEI in this area. And so thank you all for the work that you all do.
Well, there's actually a question from the audience that I think you might be interested, able to answer. And so this question is, can you define what a safe space is? And also, you know, how do we have these honest discussions if, you know, if we're concerned about saying the wrong thing? I mean, this is something that I've heard come up from others, and it's kind of what one of these questions is around. And I know that's something you've thought a lot about.
Yeah. So when we talk about safe space, we talk about an area that is reflected and represented for a specific affinity group where they can come and be vulnerable and share stories, but also have some takeaways. So when we talk about safe spaces, sometimes these may be cultural centers or resource centers that we see on college and university campuses that are for specific affinity groups, whether it's our Black students or our Latino students or Native students or LGBTQ plus students. So these resource centers serve as those safe spaces where these individuals can come, be their authentic selves. They also get to learn more about their cultural ethnicity, heritage, history. It's really this opportunity for them to come and connect that may not be presented for them at a predominantly white institution or in a larger society. So that safe space, I'm coming here, I can be my authentic self. I'm coming here, I'm feeling supported for who I am and who I identify as. So that's what we have in these safe spaces. When we are doing programs or events, we also like to say we want to invite everybody to this safe space, meaning that we want to create this space where everybody can come and engage and be their authentic selves, but also respecting the words that others are sharing as well too. So having that safe space, being in that space to be authentic, to share your story, such as our panelists have done today. They have been very transparent in some of their experiences. So again, creating that safe space. And so how do we have those conversations of where we don't want to say the wrong thing? I always say it's important that we have dialogue of where we may say the wrong thing, but it's important because then we can say, well, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say, or maybe you should say it this way, opposed to if you're coming in a space and not even saying anything, we can't even fix the issue. So always come and be yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. We're not perfect. So in this work of DEI, I say it's my job to meet individuals where they're at. And then that's how we start on the education. It's not my job to judge anybody. I've heard pretty much almost anything. And I tell people, I don't get offended. I said, my job is to really work and educate people and meet them where they're at. That's how we make change. If I was to hear something that I felt offended about and jumped at somebody and said that was the wrong thing to say, or you shouldn't say that, the conversation closes. So how can I create that space for them to be comfortable to say the wrong thing? Just because you say the wrong thing, that gives us the opportunity to fix it and address it. So it's okay. We all make mistakes. We're not perfect. And that's the world of DEI. We're working to address changes that need to be fixed. So it's okay to make mistakes. But it's important that when somebody does make that mistake, that you receive it in a positive manner of where we can address it and continue the conversation, opposed to attacking them and the conversation ends.
Yeah. I want to actually add to that, because tying it back into that sort of safe space environment, like I think it's really refreshing when somebody is like, I want to say this, but maybe I don't know the right words to use. And conversations around DEI and belonging are really challenging, like especially for people that are learning and trying to recognize their own privilege and how they've maybe contributed to some of the issues in DEI. And so even entering a space where you know that people are learning and they're going to sort of ask you for help, that space to me would feel a lot safer than when I go into a meeting and I know I'm going to have to be on like defensive microaggression, like respond now. It's like just that mentality difference is huge. And so I want to just second everything Bryce said, and then just promote having that recognition is better than not asking and continuing to be wrong and, the language you use, or be hurtful in that language.
Do other panelists have comments on this issue? We're just about out of time here. Just a few minutes left. And I'm wondering if I could ask one more question. And I'll ask this question, I think fits right into what we've been talking about. How can allies help make a space welcoming to a URM scientist if the space is overwhelmingly white, male, etc.? And I think we just have 3 minutes left. So if there's any thoughts you have on this.
I can start with returning to the allyship conversation. Mm-hmm. Sort of making that commitment to continue learning and educating yourself, just like reading books about racism, about sexism, and how it can impact the people around you, and making sure that, the person that's entering the space, whether it's a person of color or whatever other minority they identify as, having their back. And even if it's just you and just them in a room of 50 other people who maybe are not as aware of the situation, just having that one person there can make them feel much more welcome. So yeah, I think allyship in spaces like that is incredibly important.
All right, great. I think that's a great place for us to close. There are a number of such interesting questions, and Bryce and I will be answering those offline because our time has come to a close. And if we need to consult with the panelists, we'll certainly do so. So thank you so much to the panelists. It was really interesting, all that you had to say. I learned a lot, and as Bryce said, I really appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable in this forum with so many people here. So thank you for coming back and giving back to us.
Yeah, and thanks to all those that joined us today. We had at least 100 or so attendees online today. So it was obviously a topic of interest to our greater community. Thank you, Anne, Javed, Linda, and Chrissy for lending us your personal experience, but also expertise in the area. We'll hope you will join us for future Berkeley Ecosystems events. You can find out more online at ecosystems.berkeley.edu. As a quick reminder, you'll be receiving a survey in the coming minutes, most likely. Take a few minutes and please give us your feedback on today's discussion, but also on future programming. We hope, again, that we'll see you soon. And as we say in Berkeley, go Bears.